Welcome to the CFP Study Hall, where each episode we break down 3 CFP exam style questions so you can pass the CFP exam. I'm your host, Nicole. Now, each question starts with an easier question, then we ramp up the difficulty throughout so you can sharpen your test taking skills and your financial planning knowledge. So let's open our books and get to work. Question 1. The CFP Board's disciplinary process for an alleged violation of the standards of conduct begins with A. Automatic suspension of the CFP certificant's right to use the marks pending investigation. B. A public announcement of the complaint to protect the consuming public. C. An investigation by the CFP Board's Compliance Department to determine whether the complaint has merit. D. A formal hearing before a panel of CFP certificants selected by the CFP Board. Take a moment to think about your answer. Now let's start with eliminating the incorrect answers first. Choice A. Automatic suspension of the CFP certificant's right to use the marks pending investigation is incorrect. The CFP Board does not automatically suspend someone simply because a complaint has been filed. The disciplinary process includes due process protections before any sanctions are imposed. Now, choice B, a public announcement of the complaint, is also incorrect. Complaints are not publicly announced at the beginning of the process. Public disclosure typically occurs only after a final disciplinary determination has been made. Now, choice D, a formal hearing before a panel of CFP certificants comes later in the process if the investigation finds sufficient grounds for disciplinary action. While it is a piece of the puzzle, it's not the starting point. That leaves choice C. The correct answer is C, an investigation by the CFP Board's Compliance Department to determine whether the complaint has merit. When a complaint is received, the Compliance Department first investigates to determine whether there is evidence of a potential violation. If the investigation suggests a violation may have occurred, then the case may move forward to additional disciplinary proceedings. Now let's go to question 2. Elena Vasquez, CFP, advises her client Thomas against selling all equity positions in his portfolio during a market downturn. Thomas is competent, understands the likely consequence, and provides written instructions to sell all equities immediately. Elena should A. Refuse to sell the positions because doing so conflicts with Thomas's best financial interests. B. Reduce equity exposure by 50% as a reasonable compromise that protects the client. C. Follow Thomas's written instructions after documenting her professional recommendation and Thomas's informed decision to proceed. D. Transfer the account to another advisor who will follow the instructions without objection. Now take a moment to think about your answer. Let's go through these choices by elimination. Let's start with choice A. Refusing to sell the positions is not correct. While Elena has a duty to act in the client's best interest and provide sound advice, the client ultimately retains the decision-making authority as long as they're competent and the request is lawful. Choice B, reducing equity exposures by 50% as a compromise, is also not correct. A CFP professional cannot unilaterally change a client's instructions just to create a middle ground. Ultimately, that means they're acting without the client's authorization. Choice D, transferring the account to another advisor, is unnecessary. Disagreement with the client's investment decision does not require you to end an advisory relationship. And that leaves us with choice C. The correct answer is C. Follow Thomas's written instructions after documenting her professional recommendation and Thomas's informed decision to proceed. Under the CFP Board's standard of conduct, a CFP professional must provide appropriate advice and clearly explain the risks and consequences of a client's decision. However, if the client has decision-making capacity, understands all of the risk, and gives lawful instructions, the advisor generally must follow those instructions after properly documenting the recommendation and the client's informed decision. Now let's look at our last question today. Scenario is this. The CFP Board's Disciplinary and Ethics Commission reviews 4 open cases involving CFP certificants. The Commission must determine which case warrants an interim suspension, a remedy that restricts the certificate's use of the CFP marks before a full hearing is completed. Which case most likely qualifies for interim suspension? A. Client complained about failure to rebalance per the investment policy statement. B. Guilty plea to wire fraud involving diversion of client retirement savings. C. Missed deadline for 14 of 30 required CE credits. D. Subject to a preliminary SEC inquiry with no formal charges filed. Take a moment to think about your answer. All right, let's start with eliminating the incorrect answer. Choice A, a client complaint about failure to rebalance the portfolio does not rise to the level of severity required for an interim suspension. While it could represent poor practice or even misconduct depending on the facts, it would normally be investigated through the standard disciplinary process rather than triggering an immediate restriction. Now, choice C, missing continuing education requirements, is more of an administrative issue related to maintaining your certification. CE deficiencies are typically addressed through the certification renewal process, and since it does not represent an immediate threat to the public, it's not something that they're going to act on immediately. Now, choice D, being subject to a preliminary SEC inquiry without formal charges, is also insufficient. An inquiry alone does not establish wrongdoing or a threat that would justify an interim suspension. Ultimately, it's a preliminary inquiry. There have not been any charges faced. That leaves us with choice B. So our correct answer is B, guilty plea to wire fraud involving diversion of client retirement savings. The CFP Board may impose an interim suspension when a certificate has been convicted of or pled guilty to a felony or crime involving fraud, misrepresentation, or any type of deceit. When client funds are involved, the Commission may act very quickly to restrict that individual's use of the CFP marks while the full disciplinary process proceeds in order to make sure that they are protecting the public. And that wraps up episode 2 of the CFP Study Hall. Today, we worked through 3 questions focused on professional conduct and regulation, including the CFP Board's disciplinary process, the duty to follow client instructions, and when the board may impose an interim suspension. Next episode, we'll move into general principles of financial planning, where we will cover topics like the financial planning process, client engagement, and how planners structure recommendations. Until next time, keep studying, and remember, this is a marathon, not a sprint.